Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first breakout session of BLISS 2023. My name is Ibnul Wara, and I'm the Managing Director of Austin Limited. I'll be moderating this session today. Our topic today is leather, the truly sustainable material. Leather making is one of the oldest crafts, and the use of leather has been part of human civilization for centuries. It is a byproduct of the meat industry, and we have an ethical choice to either dispose the hides into landfill or upcycle them into leather, which can then be further used in the forms of shoes, bags, garments, and upholstery. Whilst leather industry has often been rightfully criticized for bad working conditions and environmental degradations, there is also a recognition that leather can be a sustainable material if tanned in a responsible manner. While leather itself is a renewable product, hides can further contribute to a circular economy if tanned responsibly. According to SEDESA, the trimmings can be used to produce gelatin for the food industry. Grease from the raw hides can be converted into tallow used for biodiesel. Shaving wastes can be converted into effective fertilizers. And chromium from the tanning process can be transformed into chromium sulfate, which can then be reused. Against this backdrop, today's breakout session aims to explore the idea of leather, the truly sustainable material, and find out how Bangladesh can leverage this narrative to boost its export potential while adhering to environmental, social, and governance standards. It will further shed light on how, by embracing sustainability, Bangladesh can not only enhance its global competitiveness, but also contribute to a sustainable leather industry to achieve our export target of $10 billion by 2023, given by our Honorable Prime Minister during her speech at the inauguration ceremony of BLISS 2023. In our panel today, we have three very distinguished members who come with a lot of knowledge and experience on this topic. Firstly, I would like to call up on stage Ms. Deborah Taylor, the Managing Director of Sustainable Leather Foundation, a non-profit organization set up in July 2020, specifically to support the leather industry to become more sustainable. Prior to setting up SLF, Deborah has managed Leather Working Group for 5 years. Since April 2020, Deborah has also worked as a consultant for the UNICEF on the project to enhance traceability and transparency for more sustainable value chain in the garment and footwear sector. A practitioner member of the Chartered Quality Institute and a certified SA 8000 lead auditor, she also serves as a council member of the Society of Leather Technologists and Chemists. Welcome, Deborah. Welcome to Bangladesh and welcome to BLISS 2023. We look forward to learning a lot from you during the session today and see how Bangladesh can achieve milestones in sustainability in the leather sector. Thank you. Our next panelist is Mr. Warner Lange. Since 2017, Warner has been working as a coordinator for the portfolio of GIZ projects based in RMG and leather sector in Bangladesh. The portfolio oversees several local projects which are financed by the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. Warner brings more than 30 years of management experience in European fashion chain, including manufacturers and retailers. In 2014, he joined GIZ as head of the Secretariat of the BMZ-driven initiative Partnership for Sustainable Textile in Germany before taking over the coordination of the textile project portfolio in Bangladesh since 2017. Welcome.
And I forgot to tell you that my grandfather was manufacturing leather boots.
Wonderful. We have the right people in the panel today. Thanks, Warner, for joining us. We also have with us Mr. Carl Flack, Supervisory Board Member of Leather Naturally and Senior Director Operational Strategies International Leather Tanning Group, ISA TanTech. Since graduating from the Western German Tanning School in Reutlingen in 1986, Mr. Flack has gathered a lifetime of experience in the hide, leather, and shoe industry. Since 2007, he has worked as the COO and later as Senior Director for Operational Strategies for the global ISA Group since 2017. Mr. Flack has been elected member of LWG's technical subgroup, working on protocol development and changes. Since 2021, he has been an active member of Supervisory Council of Leather Naturally. We have the full panel here up on stage. Welcome everyone, and we look forward to having a healthy discussion with you all. Carl, good that your microphone is working because my first question is to you. A recent ILM article reads, synthetic leather performs much worse than real leather in terms of tear resistance, breathability, or durability. This underlines the need to consider not only ethical and environmental concerns, but also functionality and quality of the product. In your opinion, what makes leather a truly sustainable material?
Thank you, Ibnul. Before getting started, I would like to thank the organizers of BLISS 2023 for inviting us to these breakout sessions and generally for organizing such a great exhibition and forum for talks and discussions. Before defining what makes leather a truly sustainable material, we should maybe just stop and ask what is so attractive about leather. And I read an article in Leather Naturalist's website written by Liam Ma, Global Creative Director of ECHO, and he said, exaggeration to say that out of all the materials used in fashion and footwear, leather is the material with by far the greatest potential. Another reason that supporters the claim of leather being sustainable is the bio-content of leather. It is very high compared to many other materials used in the shoe and the apparel industry. The bio-content is a measure of new carbon or recent organic carbon compared to the amount of old carbon. New carbon originates from renewable biological sources, such as plants, animals, forests, marine, feedstuff, etc. And old carbon is predominantly from petroleum-based products. For example, oil extracted from a plant is 100% bio-based, and oil derived from petroleum fracking is 0% bio-based. They can have the same chemical composition, but one is from a renewable source, the other not. The higher the amount of bio-based content, the higher the amount of renewable carbon. The production of renewable carbon is made by the capture of carbon from the atmosphere, in practical terms, cleaning the air. Animal skins have 100% renewable carbon. That means that a hide is 100% renewable. The transformation of skin to leather is partly done with some petroleum-based products. Not all chemicals that we use can be non-petroleum based. But this reduces the amount of bio-based content in the leather, but most leathers still have more than 80% bio-based content. Having 80% bio-based content is generally considered very good in terms of sustainability and environmental impact. A higher bio-based content indicates that the product or material relies more on renewable resources, which can help reduce the overall carbon footprint and dependence on non-renewable fossil fuels. Products with high bio-based content are seen as more environmentally friendly and can contribute to mitigating climate change and promoting sustainable practices. Are you all with me? These 6 points that I just mentioned, they are all good arguments for nominating leather as a sustainable winner. But I have to repeat that only if the leather is designed to be sustainable, is it really sustainable. It doesn't really matter how high the bio-based content is of the leather if it was made using child labor or the wastewater was let into the river untreated. So we all have a duty to produce responsibility and to produce responsible leather if we want to change the world's perception of leather. Because the perception is still, from a big group of people, that tanning is polluting, dirty, and unsustainable. It might not be true, but it is the perception. And I think with that I will say thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl. So you've made your case that leather itself is a sustainable material, but the problem or the challenge, I wouldn't say problem, I think the challenge lies in how we process the leather responsibly. And you've also mentioned about the perception of leather, which is another big discussion on what can be done to change the perception of leather, and the moment we hear leather, we think about the environmental sides of it or the compliance sides of it. So there needs to be steps taken in order to change that narrative about leather and tanning of the leather. So I think with that, I would like to come to you, Deborah. You are running a successful organization, foundation, Sustainable Leather Foundation. So in your opinion, how can the leather industry in Bangladesh promote sustainability throughout the entire supply chain, from sourcing raw material to production and distribution? Because supply chain is, we're talking about traceability a lot now, and traceability along the whole supply chain. So when we make a bag or when we make a pair of shoes, it's not just about whether the factory that's making the bag or shoes are sustainable, but all the components that go into making that product, we have to ensure sustainability along the whole supply chain. So I would like to pick your brains on that. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here with you again. Many of you I've met previously, but for those I haven't, thank you. And I look forward to maybe talking to you some more over the course of the next couple of days. Sustainability and Bangladesh are not two words that necessarily go hand in hand as we're perceived in the media currently. And there are many reasons for that. If we think about the bigger value chain, society, civil society, and therefore brands and consumers are now looking to see that we do have responsible supply chains from raw material, from farming, right through to the end product. There have been many discussions about our responsibility in the leather industry, starting just at the slaughter floor, and that anything before that belongs to the farming industry and the meat industry. But that's not necessarily the case, because without that farming and without that livestock, we don't have our raw material source. So it is incumbent upon us to also accept some responsibility for the well-being of the animals, how they're raised and how they're cared for in life, so that they look after us in death. So, for many years we've talked about a need to improve environmental standards, and it's been in the voluntary realm, but that hasn't worked. And many people only do certification, they only do compliance if their brands force them to, not because they want to and not because they see the value of that. They also tend to see it as a drain on their finances instead of thinking about the positive return that they may see on that investment. But because it hasn't been successful in the voluntary domain, we now have legislation and regulation that's coming into being that is going to make us change and make us think more about our accepted responsibilities as producers and as manufacturers and as sellers of these products. I've got a slide here, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but these are just some of the examples of the incoming legislation and regulation at EU level and in the US. There are a couple of key pieces, really, that encompass sustainability. The first is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. This is a regulation that will affect any company that operates in the EU. It will start next year just with the very largest companies, but it will affect smaller companies over the next few years. And here we see a real shift away from just thinking about environmental concerns to thinking about the rest of ESG, to thinking about the social concerns and the good governance. Within that, we have a breakdown here of the ESG, but if we go back to the legislation slide just for one moment, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive is going to replace the non-financial reporting. So it really strengthens the need to be able to provide due diligence over your supply chain. And how that affects people outside of the EU is that your potential customers, especially as you grow your export market, will have expectations of you as part of that supply chain to meet those due diligence needs. So even though you may think you're not in the EU so that it doesn't affect you, it will affect you long term as it rolls out. There is another key piece of legislation, the due diligence legislation with the focus on deforestation. This could be a real opportunity for Bangladesh. From next year, again, people will have to be able to demonstrate that there is no deforestation in their supply chains. And if they can't demonstrate that, they won't be able to sell their goods in Europe. So again, this is something that is really important. It feeds into the traceability story. The only way that you can demonstrate that there is no deforestation in your supply chain is to be able to demonstrate your supply chain and where it has come from. Otherwise, you're in the risk category. So being able to talk to where your raw material comes from is going to be really important. And being able to demonstrate that and evidence it will be really important. A couple of other pieces. The strategy for sustainable and circular textile regulations in the EU. Places like France and Germany have already gone quite a long way in implementing these regulations. And for example, in France now, every label on a product has to talk about the origins of that product, how it was composed, and what are the options for disposal at the end of life. So things like this are just the tip of the iceberg, and more is coming down the line. So as a nation that wants to increase its exports and become more prosperous, you are going to have to be able to comply with these legislative requirements moving forward. And even in places like New York, the New York Fashion Sustainability and Social Accountability Act means that any organization that operates and has its headquarters in the state of New York, not just the city, will have to report on at least 50% of its supply chain and do its due diligence across there. So I'm not going to talk for too much more. I can talk for hours on this legislation, and I'm happy to talk to people more about it. But if we move to the next slide, I just want to break down those key areas of ESG. As I mentioned, it's not just about the environmental, it's also about the social and the governance. And all of these elements matter. So we get hung up in Bangladesh on the Savar CETP and how that maybe is a barrier to export and a barrier to trade, and how if you can't do that, then you might as well not do anything. Actually, you can do an awful lot. The CETP issue is one small cog in a much bigger ESG spectrum that we need to consider. And at SLF, we're already working with quite a few facilities, you'll see a little bit later on, across all of these areas to support in that. And your brands will welcome this. They will welcome understanding that you're working on these areas across the board, and that will bring you better profitability, which will make you more sustainable for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. That gives us hope that not having a fully functional ETP doesn't mean the end of the world for Bangladesh. We do understand that there are EU regulatory changes coming up, and it's very important for Bangladesh to focus and keep up with those changes, and maybe not just be hung up on the ETP issue, and do our own due diligence to cover the ESG aspects which do not impact the ETP part of it. I would like to ask you another question, Deborah, while I'm still with you. Can you tell us, you've already mentioned a little bit on this, but if you can elaborate on how SLF certification can be a better and more realistic alternative for a huge number of Bangladeshi leather products and footwear exporters to enhance their competitiveness, because we seem to be, I've been using this word quite a lot, we are hung up on the LWG aspect of it, but what are the alternatives, what are the way outs for Bangladesh as a country, because there are certain areas which are beyond the control of us businesses. For example, the CETP, it's not in our hands. We are doing the best we can, but as businesses, what other alternatives do we have?
Yeah. As was mentioned, I used to manage Leather Working Group for 5 years before I set up the foundation. And one of the things that I was very passionate about and still am passionate about, which is why I set up the foundation, is supporting all of the industry, not just those guys that can tick all the boxes of LWG. I've already mentioned LWG is only really focusing on the environmental aspects, and within ESG we need to look at more than that. But when I set up the foundation, I really wanted to create a system, a tool, and a platform that would work for anybody at whatever part of their journey they are at. And I call it the AIM approach. It has to be accessible, it has to be inclusive, and it has to be modular. So the slide that you can see here is a real case study of a facility, actually a facility in Italy, that we started working with in October 2021. Now, the wheels that you can see on the screen here, there's one for environmental, one for social, and one for governance. And all of those topics that were on the previous slide are contained across this dashboard that you can see. So the company started with us in October 2021 with a completely grey dashboard because they had no certification at all. They hadn't done any auditing. They hadn't even started any work on this. We provided them with all of the tools that they needed to do the work themselves. They did not need a really expensive consultant. They could do the work themselves. We have standards and benchmarks, we have templates, and we have guidance notes. And we also provide guided support to get them to a position where they can start doing the work themselves. So over the next 6 months, up till the middle set of wheels that you can see here, we managed to move them from grey to work in progress, which is what the orange represents. It's a very simple traffic light system. If it's grey, the work hasn't started yet. If it's orange, it's work in progress, but they haven't had an audit or a third-party certificate to verify that work yet. And if it's green, it means that they're meeting the standards required, and they've had an audit. If it's red, it means they're failing the standard. Now, there's a big distinction between a red failure and a work in progress. If it's a failure, that will be regulatory. That will be a legal permission or requirement that they are not able to meet yet. Whereas if they're just not quite there, that's a work in progress. This really helps organizations, and actually when they see the transition from grey to orange, it encourages them on this continual development road that gets them to where they need to be. So in March 22, we said, okay, you guys are now ready for an audit. We arranged the audit. It was delivered in the May. And in the June, that's the end set of wheels that you can see there. A lot of their dashboard is now green, is under certification, and is meeting the standards expected internationally. The beauty of the system is that it is modular. So if you're not ready to do a lot of that work yet, that's fine. We just don't concentrate there yet. So for example, your effluent treatment, that's one section on the environmental wheel. It's not the rest of those wheels. So there is a lot of work that you can do, and the way that we adopt our approach means that it works for anybody. You can work with your brands in partnership and say, okay, I can only do 2 things this year. What are the 2 things that you really need me to do this year? Let's concentrate on that, and next year we move on to the next. And we can create a program that fits the particular case study.
Thanks, Deborah. So from what I understand, there are, I'm not sure if my numbers are correct here. I was counting in the wheels, there are about 33 sections out of the 3 ESGs. So you're saying that environmental is just 1 out of the 33 areas. Is that?
No, the effluent treatment is 1. So that
sorry, the effluent treatment plant.
Effluent treatment,
yeah. Okay.
The environmental components.
Sorry, the environmental has a few, yes. So out of the environmental wheel, there's only 1 area which is the effluent treatment plant. So the other 32 are in the hands of the businesses themselves?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's very good information to have, Deborah. So that means that we have 32 areas to work on ourselves as businesses while we wait for the ETP to get to where we want it to be to get our LWG accreditation. Of course, I'm not saying that LWG accreditation is absolutely important for Bangladesh. We cannot discard that. But while we wait, our businesses, I would like to urge our tanners to focus on the other 32 areas and take ourselves up to the point where the moment the CTP is fully functional, we will be fully ready to get our LWG certification and not waste our time while we are waiting for the ETP to be fixed. Warner, my next question is for you. What collaborative opportunities exist for Bangladesh's leather industry to work with international organizations and development partners such as GIZ to address challenges and enhance sustainability and competitiveness in the global market? I believe GIZ is already working with some of the things in the leather sector with our association. So can you please elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. Let me first talk a bit about GIZ in general. GIZ is working on behalf of the Federal Ministry of, and listen, Economic Cooperation and Development. So we are 100% owned by the German government and somehow positioned between, let's say, policy and implementation. Or in other words, we understand ourselves very often as the honest broker or the matchmaker. And seeing Saiful sitting in the first row, at the times when GIZ was called GTZ, former colleagues were the matchmakers, and it turned out in a partnership. And there's a fine distinction between partnership and collaboration. We are using these words very often. The core interest of a partnership is profit, sharing profit in a fair way. Instead, collaboration is more achieving a certain aim in a group of willing ones. But this driving element of profit is not there. If I come back to the name of our ministry, Economic Cooperation and Development, it somehow excludes the idea of profit, but on the other hand, we are all aware that profit is the driving element. And I sometimes try to reduce it to a very simple saying: comply or die, commercially, or the opposite, comply and fly. So the legislation Deborah already referred to, whether from the US or North America or from Europe, Green Deal, this regulatory log frame, if you want, is driving us more and more. So if you remember the Rana Plaza disaster, that was a strong driver, a strong impact. There was no regulation, and 10 years later, Germany was one of the first movers in bringing this due diligence law to the German parliament, like France earlier and also Norway. So the expectations to comply with regulatory framework are increasing constantly and somehow are simply representing market access. Comply or die, comply or fly. So we try to, when it comes from policy to implementation or to grassroots level, to bring all involved stakeholder groups together and operate on macro, meso, micro level, always considering to bring ecological aspects, environmental and social in balance. So it's the ESG logic. And to give you an example from the textile sector, there is a project which runs under the abbreviation IGS, Initiative Global Solidarity, where the German government is supporting the local industry, in this case the garment industry, but not only with so-called regional business hubs. We have these in 5 countries where we support the local industry, of course, in their relationship with buyers, how to jointly create the transparency due diligence legislation is expecting. This is one example where we can, or where we are contributing. And I think this is a strong, how should I say, competitive advantage for us as an organization, implementing organization, that we are very close to policy, but at the same time, our ministry is developing together with us projects to help implementation. So far.
So comply or die, comply and fly. Of course, we want to comply and we want to fly. Another question, Warner. So basically, from what I understood from talking to Deborah earlier is, out of the 33 areas, if we comply on 32, but unfortunately, due to a situation that exists in Bangladesh, our limitations, we cannot meet that one aspect, which is the central effluent treatment plant. How can we still fly as businesses when we are doing all the right things in the other 32 areas, because the customers are still pushing us to get our LWG certifications, and that is where we get stuck every time. I mean, we come to a dead end when we come to that discussion.
Yeah, while putting this question, you start smiling, I'm smiling, everyone is smiling. I think everyone knows what went wrong. And the way out, like Bay and Apex choose, set up private-run effluent treatment plants, can be a solution, but then it ends up into the question, are only the big ones surviving, or do also the small and medium enterprises, and this is the typical size in the tanning industry, do they have a realistic chance to survive? For me, it remains an open question. But until and unless this effluent treatment thing is not solved, right. I don't have to finish the sentence or the thought. It's obvious.
But I think it's a good sign that you mentioned the big players like Apex and Bay setting up their own effluent treatment plants. I would like to, request them to also explore options, whether the ETPs that they're building, whether there are any scope of sharing part of those ETPs with the other smaller tanneries that exist around that area, so that it becomes sort of a private shared ETP and not a personal ETP, just for the interest of the whole industry. Because these are small players who operate around the big players, and they don't have the capacity or even the area, the space to set up their own ETP. So just a thought that came to my mind right now while talking, that whether there are options of sharing their ETPs with one or two smaller ones. At least that gives us a little bit more option
I'm nevertheless optimistic that it has a chance. And just to talk about the example of the employment injury protection, which we are introducing together with ILO and the ready-made garment sector, and I'm absolutely confident there are some first talks that other industries might follow. Maybe one of these industries is in the room. It was more a collaboration and also including elements of partnership. In this case, the buyers are contributing on a voluntary basis, financially, to start this employment injury protection scheme. So if there is a common interest and in the end of the day profit is involved, then it will work. So I think it needs partnership elements, it needs collaboration, yes. Early this year we went with GIZ, government representatives, association representatives to Vietnam, and the Vietnamese people were absolutely interested in this potential Bangladesh has. I mean, we are always talking about 5 billion, and the cost to have a proper effluent treatment plant, according to me, is homeopathic, the investment. And we were talking about 70 million, which are lost in the current effluent treatment plant. 70, even another 70 against 5 billion is nothing. So the question is more how to create momentum, how to create cooperation and partnership. In comparison to the ready-made garment industry, I think, maybe it sounds cynical, but the Rana Plaza disaster was an occasion, an option, an opportunity for the ready-made garment industry. I don't say the leather industry needs something comparable, but it was such a strong push, like the Titanic disaster. But do we have to wait for such kind of catastrophe to make the industry improving? I don't think so. It's more orchestrating the willing ones, and as I said, include profit, otherwise no one will move.
Absolutely. We don't want, we don't want to be pushed back to that point where, we start losing business, which we are already starting to see. Anyhow, I think one last question for you, Werner. In terms of policies, what role can government policies and regulations play in promoting sustainability within the leather industry, and how can the industry collaborate with policymakers to achieve those goals? If you can briefly mention a few points.
Yes, I think somehow we are entering a new era, probably, talking about circularity or circular business models. We are coming from this linear one, producing, using, and disposing. So you have two ends, and probably at the two ends also two governments or two regulators. If it turns into a circular model, difficult to find a corner in a circular room. So where does a circle start? Everywhere. And I think we should focus and concentrate at that part of the circle where Bangladesh lies, and concentrate and focus our efforts there. But nevertheless, since we are all aware that this new legislation and regulation coming from the EU is more and more affecting either the linear model as well as it will the circular one, I think it needs also alignment of regulation, not at both ends, but everywhere. Or in other words, with these strong ties between Bangladesh and Europe, especially Germany, I would strongly recommend that also governments, as in their role and function as regulators, are more and more collaborating. It is not helpful that there's only coming from one end, from Europe, expectations in combination with comply or die. No, this fly element must be more integrated, and I think governments should work more closely. Or in other words, just to add, extending the grace period when it comes to EBA is moving the problem into future, but it is not solving it. And Bangladesh will lose this advantage of EBA sooner or later, and EU will lose its carrot. So how is the next carrot and stick model look like? And this means also taxation comes into play. Regulation is not enough. It needs regulation also to provide a level playing field. So also from that perspective, regulation is not enough. Taxation should be strongly linked with that. And this is also a call for governments to think about new models of, call it EBA, VAT, probably CAT, a carbon-related tax. And we have examples already. Since October, in the steel and aluminum and cement industry, we have a border tax in Europe. And it's only a first effort, a kind of pilot. Other areas of commodities, consumer products, might follow. Okay, this is a long-term or mid-term perspective, but since October we have the first evidence, so let's don't wait another 6 years, and that's probably already a bit late.
Thanks, Werner. Leather, the truly sustainable material. Before we continue our discussion, from what we understand so far, leather itself is a sustainable material. It is a byproduct, it contributes to the circular economy, it's durable, It's the bio content that Carl mentioned. As a material, it has all the aspects that sustainability requires. The challenge, from what I understand from this discussion so far, is in the processing part of it, where probably Bangladesh as a nation, we're a little bit behind and we have a bit of a catching up to do. Deborah, coming back to you, one last question. You've been working with Bangladesh for quite some time now, during your time with LWG and even since 2020 when you started SLF. Could you share one success story or best practices from Bangladesh showcasing how sustainable practices have led to improved market access, brand reputation, and better business outcomes? Because we've talked a lot about the challenges, but what are the areas of hopes that you've seen in your first-hand experience with Bangladesh?
It's a really nice lead in there, because actually a good example would be yourselves and Picard at Oztan. I want to show you this slide. These are Bangladesh companies that are currently on our dashboard. And there is a variety of ways in which each of these companies has been working with us. So for example, you can see that we have Apex Footwear here. Now, we haven't actually delivered an audit at Apex because they have good certification in place already. So their dashboard is built on an equivalency basis, which is another one of our foundation keystones, that we don't expect people to duplicate time or effort. So if you already have good third-party certification in place, we map that onto your dashboard for you. We don't make you do it again. So that's one example of how we work. With Oztan and Picard, we have audited both of their facilities across all three areas of ESG. Now, this is a really good example of starting to connect the dots of responsibility. We are no longer just working with tanneries. We're working with the product facilities. We're working with the chemical companies. We have a dashboard for chemical companies. We have a dashboard for traders. We have a dashboard for the product manufacturers. Within our bigger sustainability story, we have to connect the dots of responsibility. We only established ourselves at the foundation in 2020, so we're still evolving the dashboards, but the development that we're working on now is with the meat packers and the processors, because then we start connecting the dots back to the farming. Now, within all of this, obviously, that AIM approach still applies. So we can connect the dots of good responsibility where they exist, and we can certify that, and we can carry on working to improve it over a period of time. There are then a couple of other facilities that you can see on there. For example, Samina Tannery. They've joined us, but they have no certification yet. So their dashboard is still grey, but they're able to now benefit from all of the tools, all of the information, and start their journey. And then we have FB Footwear. We haven't connected them to a tannery yet, but we've done their product manufacturing facility across, again, all three areas of ESG. So these are case studies of companies that we are working with really effectively to support them in their journey. And, well, I'll ask you, Ibnul, has it been successful for you working with us so far? Let's throw the question back to him.
Honestly, yes, of course. The good thing about SLF, to be honest, is the option or the opportunity to demonstrate continuous improvement. It's not just, coming in once every 2 years and putting a red, green or orange and reviewing after 2 years. It's a continuous improvement, and I think within our organization we've demonstrated that. There were a few oranges which later on turned into green. So this is a fantastic thing, and I think the fact that one good thing about SLF versus LWG is, of course, LWG. I'm not trying to compare here, but one good thing about SLF is the inclusiveness of the product manufacturers in the supply chain, which truly creates a sustainable supply chain. It's for example, you gave our organization example of Picard Bangladesh Limited and Oztan being audited. So we can now tell our customers that we are SLF supply chain. So it's not just that Ostan is SLF or Picard Bangladesh is SLF. LWG is not there yet. LWG is not inclusive towards the auditing the product manufacturers. So that's one good thing. But to be honest, the challenge that we face is, and it's not your fault or SLF's fault. It's just that SLF is only just 3 years old. We need the brands to know SLF more, and that's going to happen in the coming years. I'm very confident. And I know you've been talking to some of our customers as well. So I think until the brands embrace SLF the way they have embraced LWG, as manufacturers, we will still continue having these debates with our customers as to why SLF should be an acceptable standard for them, because we as manufacturers, we are still being pushed to get LWG, and as of today having SLF is not enough, but I'm pretty sure you'll get there. You are onboarding new brands continuously, and I'm very pleased to see your progress in Bangladesh, because I think when we started, we were the first product manufacturers in Bangladesh that got SLF certification. Now you have FB Footwear, you have Apex, which is a fantastic story. And talking about Apex, it is not just the kind of company that they are. They don't wait for the customers to ask for their for certification or compliance requirements. One example is I heard that Apex got their their local business recently got their BSCI certification. And this, you mentioned when you were speaking earlier that the compliance certifications are done when the push comes from the customers, but we have examples here in our room where Apex got their BSCI certification for the local market where there's no such requirement. So these, our ways of doing business are also changing. The way we see the world is also changing.
Can I just say one more thing?
Please.
Ibnul's right. Adoption with the brands takes a bit of time. They want to see the proof of the concept before they come on board. But please don't be under any illusion. I don't want brands in the same way that LWG want brands, because I don't want you all doing SLF because the brands are forcing you to do it. I want you to do SLF because you know it's the right thing for you. And that's a real key distinction. So I am talking with a lot of brands, luxury and high street, and I have verbal commitments from many of them. I know I'm already in the sourcing strategy for many of them now. So they are aware of what we're doing, they like what we're doing, and they are starting to come on board. It takes a bit of time, but don't misunderstand that and think that I want brands in the same way that LWG had the brands force it down the pipeline, because that's not real change. The other thing that you mentioned is we are a real-time tool. So as you make improvements, so we reflect that on your dashboard real time. It isn't just once every 2 years, as Ibnul said, we pop in for 2 days and then you don't hear from us again for another 2 years. We're with you, we're holding your hand, and we're supporting you onward as you continue to improve. So I thought it was quite a good way to make that point as well. Thanks, Ibnul.
Thanks, Deborah. We're coming to the end of our discussion, but before we open the floor for questions from the audience, I'll come back to you, Carl, once again. And this is a question that I think quite a lot, because leather, I take leather very personally. And as with the increasing trend amongst the Gen Zs in using sustainable material, we are seeing a shift towards alternate materials such as vegan material. Do you foresee a brighter future for leather as consumers start to become more aware of the truth about leather? And that is what today's session is actually about, to communicate the true aspects to highlight the aspects of leather which are often not talked about and gets overshadowed by all the negative talks. So over to you, Carl.
Yes, you're right. There's a lot of noise from the anti-leather mafia. It's called that. That's why we started Leather Naturally 5 years ago. And now there's a part of Leather Natural called Leather Truthfully. That's a part on the website where we try to kill all these old prejudices about leather production being old-fashioned and polluting. And then we inform the public about modern tanning industry. Having said that, Leather Naturally can only do so much. Again, we have to get back to the tanneries. They have to live up to it, because the truth that is presented in Leather Truthfully is, of course, the best techniques, the best available techniques. And I think that everybody would follow that. There would be no more talk, no more discussions about leather. But not only that, the world is also getting more and more complex, and even the lawmakers can no longer follow up on the decisions. You both mentioned the traceability from 2024, January 2024. They're still missing the final guidelines. So people still don't know how to do it. And that's where Leather Naturally is also getting in and helping, together with LSF and so on, to push a little bit to get these things done. I believe that we can change the people's mindset when it comes to perception of leather. But the problem is that it's getting more and more complex. Again, it's not only leather is nice and beautiful. Now we have to do life cycle assessments. We have to do science-based targets. All these things are getting complicated for a normal tanner. So that's where I'm a little nervous about that. Sustainability is like a new industry. There's a lot of people there who would like to earn some money, and I'm afraid that will take over at the end of the day. But then again, I would just, as a short answer to your question, I would like to say a bright future is a lot to ask, but everything is possible in Bangladesh.
Absolutely, thanks Carl, and that is the theme of our BLISS 2023, Possible in Bangladesh, and thanks for reinstating it for us that everything is actually possible in Bangladesh. With that, I would like to now open the floor for question and answers. So I think we have ushers here who, with the microphone, I think Mr. Islam.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Saiful Islam. I'm also the advisor to the LFMEBA board and represent PICAR Bangladesh. Coming back to Warner, that you said the role of GIZ, that I said that just to clarify that it was formerly ZTZ. One of the experts of ZTZ acted as a catalyst. It is not only for partnership, it was collaboration. It started in what I would say the mid-90s. We had to go through the collaboration of ESQ for 2 years, and after that the partnership started. So I just wanted to make you clear on that, because your mandate is collaboration. So I wanted to mean that one of the informal meeting that what we had. So coming back to the main subject, the truly sustainable material is the leather. SLF, to Deborah, you had been trying to promote our country, and I can see your dashboard nowadays that when you started, and it's quite a good number of the companies are working with you. That is a great thing. When you talk about the leather, that we talk about that leather is a byproduct of meat. and we recycle it and go into the circular economy. This is one thing. And if we process the leather in a sustainable way, that's the good way. That means that we can address the ESG. Whether in in your foundation, can you please include something that if the leather is not being processed and it is not being recycled, instead of that, it goes under the ground? What happens to the world when you talk about the climate change and global warming? And in ESG, you have already mentioned about the traceability. You must be knowing that in Bangladesh, we do not have the industrial farming. What we say that it is a domestic animal. That means that it is part of our family, but how we take care of our cattle as our family member. If you kindly can do that. Thank you.
Couple of great points there, thank you. Yes, we talk a lot, and in the workshop materials that we deliver, we do talk about the fact that we are primarily getting our raw material as a byproduct of the meat industry, and that unless we convert that waste, that wrapper, then we're contributing to greater emissions through waste at landfill. I think a lot of people misunderstand this wrapper concept. And if we were creating leather today as a new product, it would be hailed as this great recycling innovation. But because we're a traditional old industry, people don't seem to be able to equate that same rationale as they would with another new material. So that's something that we're trying to address. What we do with that leather in the manufacture of it is what changes it from being a sustainable raw material, because the raw material is sustainable. Animals will self-sustain as long as we feed them and look after them. So that part of it is sorted. We do have some additional certifications that we can apply to product rather than the facility certification. So if you can guarantee that all of your raw material is coming from the meat industry, for example, then you can have that applied to your dashboard. If you're using veg tanning, you can have that applied to your dashboard so that you can add certain additional criteria level that enhance the sustainable properties of the material. So we're working very hard to do as much as we can to make sure that that information is in the public domain. The other point that you talked about, I think, is equally as important. And I think working with Bangladesh 2 years ago, when I came for the investment summit, and we talked then about the CETP, and we were talking about the need for the renewal of that. And I touch on what you mentioned earlier, Ibnul, about, is it possible to work with Apex and Bay and maybe use their CETP? I think we don't want to focus there. We want to focus on the investment that we need, and let's get the main CETP rectified, up and functioning. As a flagship story for Bangladesh, that is your leader. The minute you can say that you have a functioning CETP, the world is your oyster. When we talk about raw material sourcing, you have an abundance of raw material here in Bangladesh. One of the things that I think is crazy is that you import wet blue to meet a certification standard when you have your own domestic material here. That's not sustainability. Sustainability is using your natural resources in the best way to produce the best material moving forward that has longevity, that supports your economy locally. If you're importing raw material, you're not supporting your local economy, and that's also not sustainable. Forget about the other stuff, the emissions in transportation, the lead times, the additional costs of import. You don't need all of that. So if you get your house in order here domestically, you can do it. The traceability that we adopt doesn't have to be industrial. if you know you're using local farming, I could go on, I'm sorry, I could go on for hours on these subjects, but if you're using local farming, family farming, as long as you have regional hide collection, so you know the area that you're collecting from and there is no industrial mix with that domestic supply, that's good enough. You have enough to demonstrate no deforestation. You have enough to demonstrate your local supply. And as that then moves through the system, we attach that traceability onwards through each of the processes, through into the product manufacture and out to distribution and into the store. It's not as difficult or as complex as it needs to be. And just because you don't have industrial slaughter does not mean that you can't also prove your due diligence around traceability. Does that answer your questions?
Next question. Anyone from the audience?
Thank you. So I am Mizanur Rahman, Professor of Leather Engineering and Technology as well as Director of that institute. Basically, I'm sorry I was late because I just arrived in this seminar right now. So my question is to you because I just heard your answer from Mr. Saiful Islam's question. Because you mentioned that if we can rectify our CETP, then we can get all the things like our sustainable product, whatever sustainable manufacturing practice and so on. But why do you emphasize only on CETP? But the industry, they can also do their own ETP, or even small scale industry, they can do their own ETP, and then they can like recycle, reuse the things, and they can manage their waste properly. So they can get certification, environmental certification, or like good manufacturing practice, that's what we say usually, or green manufacturing. So I don't think CETP should be the only indicator that can enhance the sector towards like the forward direction and so on. So I guess the industry, they can get their own certification. They can practice good manufacturing in their own industry. They can recycle, reuse their own waste and so on, because this is a byproduct. This is already in the cycle, economic cycle, like circular economy and so on. So I think if we can differentiate, like CETP is its own way, because it's very difficult to upgrade or rectify the current seed. That is a common effluent treatment plant. So people can use, the industry can use that common effluent treatment plant, or they can individually manufacture or build their own ETP, and they can do their own, they can manage their own like waste and so on. I think, what do you think in this regard?
Thank you for your question.
I think we talked about this earlier. You probably missed that part of the conversation, that we did make a key point earlier, that it's just one element out of 33 elements that comprise sustainability. So it should not be the be-all and end-all. But for anybody in Bangladesh that wants an LWG certificate, unless you have your own ETP, you're not going to get an LWG certificate. So if that's what you're holding out for, it's a non-starter until that CETP is rectified. What we do at SLF, we have a different model that can support the improvement of all of those other things. What I would say is that you can't wait for that CETP to be done before you start working on the rest of it. Because if you think that just having the CETP will give you the golden tick with LWG, then you're forgetting about all the other elements of that protocol that you also have to meet. And having visited some of the facilities in Savar already, they're nowhere near standard. My call to action is that everybody starts working on those other areas that they do have direct control on and that they can have impact with right now. So that hopefully by the time we do resolve the CETP issue, or companies have their own ETPs, you'll be in a good position to meet all of the requirements. But you have to start somewhere. So we did talk about it, and you're right. It becomes the elephant in the room, and everybody says, oh, there's no point in doing anything at all because the CETP is not working, so we won't do anything. That's the wrong approach.
May I add something?
Everybody say about CETP only, not the other points. You don't raise the other issues.
I think, Mr.
Because I think many industries already improved quite a lot. If you visit, I think, Savar Tannery State, I think there are...
Mr. Mizan, I think you joined us a little late. We had quite a healthy, it wasn't, the whole discussion wasn't just about the CETP. We had discussed about how CETP is just one small part of it and how the industry can do so much on their own. We had all these discussions. I think you missed a very good discussion. We would have loved to have you here. Please share the summary of the discussion later on from someone and you'll understand. We had a very good discussion. It's not just about the CETP. Thank you. Yes, Amrita, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amrita Islam. I'm the Deputy Managing Director of BLLISS Bangladesh. So I just wanted to add to Mr. Mizan's question onto the panel because we're talking about Bangladesh and the leather sector in Bangladesh particularly. And when we look at the ESG aspect of sustainability, when we look at the governance and the social aspect, especially in terms of Bangladesh, one point that Mr. Islam made is that farming in Bangladesh, it's not organized farming, it's home farming. And that in itself has a big environmental impact because as we know, organized farming is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse effects around the world. The way that the animals are treated, the animal husbandry is maintained in Bangladesh is quite a unique story which never gets told. On top of that is the fact that the leather sector in Bangladesh historically has had very good social relationships. The relationship between the tanners and the people working in the tannery, the social and the governance aspect, how many tannery workers that we have had working in Bangladesh and the relationship and the number of occupational health and safety issues that have arisen are historically very low. So since Bangladesh, due to new protocols coming into place, has been pretty much excluded as a country, and this is with the heavy emphasis of the environmental aspect of sustainability. I would like to know what we can do to emphasize on the social and the governance aspect, which Bangladesh is actually quite a unique case in the world. And to highlight the best practices and quite unique practices that we have on hand, because it is time to change the dialogue somewhat. 2 out of 3 is actually not bad if we look at ESG. So why don't we turn the conversation a little bit on its head? And what Mr. Mizan was actually saying, let us not focus on CTP. How can we look at the governance and the social aspects of Bangladesh, and what can we do to promote this more positive brand image, which the country is actually doing quite good at, and to use this as a leverage point, because not a lot of countries can say that this much of leather is coming without any form of organized farming. And if you look at the multiplier effects, the number of families that it supports, the number of families that raise cows to be sold during our festival period, and which goes back into the economy. It is fascinating that a $1.7 billion industry is piggybacking on a leather source which is managed informally and has such a powerful backstory which is being completely ignored. So thank you.
Thank you, Amrita.
May I remind you to this nice branding of Made in Germany? Do you know who invented Made in Germany? The British. You know? To keep out German products from the UK. It was blaming and shaming. And all of you know what it is nowadays. So Made in Bangladesh, I think, is moving in this direction of Made in Germany. And I think representing and involved in this Picard partnership, you know what branding means, of course. And constantly stressing how many LEED certified factories Bangladesh has is probably one approach, but branding is fair enough. Branding is part of a business model, and you should invest in a proper branding. And of course, there is this bias of leather tanning, the bad part of the business, and on the other hand, the sustainable raw material, the touch of leather which consumers like, whether young or not. And I think this is really a special challenge to balance this negative connotation of leather and tanning, and on the other side, this positive branded, sustainable material. Not easy, but I think branding is one crucial element.
And I think to add to what you just said, a lot of it depends on us as tanners in Bangladesh. As I was saying earlier, that there are certain areas where we don't have control over, but if we get more of the tanneries in the zone to comply and get a green on the other 32 elements and leave the ETP discussion aside as a gray area, I think as a country we are going to have a stronger case. As you said, that it's sort of a non-inclusive approach, and I think the world cannot have a non-inclusive approach if the tanners do something about their own business and try to achieve green in all the other 32 elements. I think we've come to one more question. Okay, sure, why not? Okay, two more questions. These are the last two questions for today.
Thank you. I'm Tahmina. I am CEO from Annex Leather, my brand name, and I am a very small SME, woman entrepreneur. I started my business from 2016. So my queries from Deborah Taylor, Her Excellency, is to, from your SLF dashboard, if any opportunities for such like us as entrepreneur who have doesn't much compliance in factory issue. We have so many women entrepreneurs that are included in this sector and leather industry sector, but we haven't proper compliance issues. So have I any opportunities in your SLF for us? Question number two is, in our country, we have 200 more SMEs who are working with leather, and we have so many wastage and garbage. That's very bad effect on our climate, So if we think about to recycle this garbage and turn into manufacturing products, have any opportunities for us to outside who have worked already on it, recycling process, and international trade show also for us as an woman entrepreneur, if we have any chances or opportunities to visit or see if it will be more beneficiaries.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Deborah. If you can quickly answer to those two questions.
Yeah, I mean, part of the beauty of the system and the foundation is that it's accessible to all at whatever stage, whatever size you are. Everybody can benefit and can come on board and benefit from the tools, the templates, the guidance, the standards and benchmarks to enable you to become compliant at international standards. And you do it at a pace that suits you. So yes, definitely. Yeah, let's talk some more and we'll see how we can get you on board.
Absolutely. I think you're here for the next 2 days, so please reach out to Deborah and see whether your company can get SLF certification. That would be fantastic. Last question, please.
Thank you. I'm Firoz Mohammed. I'm Chief Operating Officer of Apex Footwear Limited, Unit 2. I'm looking after the local retail business. So as far as sustainability is concerned, I don't see my customers are ready to pay for additional cost for any product made from sustainable material. So my question to Mr. Warner is, as you mentioned profitability, which will drive this kind of efforts, and also you mentioned comply or die. So this compliances has additional costs. So we tried ourselves, but never ending, it seems. So who are going to pay for this additional cost? Consumers are not paying. So is there any possibilities that European Community is funding or GIZ is funding for these efforts in Bangladesh?
clear no. The consumer has to pay for it. You get what you pay, or you pay for what you get. And if the consumer is not wanting to have compliance or sustainability, of course the consumer will not pay for it. That's where regulation comes into play, but it must be smart. In an intelligent way, we have to make consumers to pay for it.
I think
compliance, sustainability is not for free. If we start internalizing the cost of environmental and social protection, for example, yes, it costs something. It's not for free. And the question is, if the free disposable income is limited, where to save money? Go not as often to the restaurant, don't travel as much. So where to save money and where to put money in sustainable products? Without the consumer, it will not work. But also without regulation, I think. And we have the typical example not a typical, a specific example in Germany, when the Russian aggression started and we were completely cut off gas, or almost completely cut off, prices went up. And the consumers are complaining like hell. So for how long will Germany support the Ukrainian people? When it comes to money, all of us, we are behaving in the same way. And too often we deny that all of us are following money and profit. I'm going home for Christmas in December. What do I buy? The cheapest ticket, of course. And I think we should be honest.
Sure. Deborah, I think you wanted to say a last...
I want to add one more thing. When you think about sustainability, you can't just think about cost. Sustainability is about protecting our future generations and about leaving our planet in a healthy state for future generations and about leaving business for future generations to also prosper. So trying to say, well, who's going to pay for it? Everybody has to pay for it. And the only way that we will make consumers pay more is if we reduce the amount that's available. This fast fashion, pile them high, sell them cheap model is not sustainable for the future. Yes, we want to make profit, but we can't continue to make profit at the expense of people and planet. And we have to bring those three things. They're your three bases of sustainability. You know, good governance is about economics, it's about ethics, it's about responsibility. Your social realm is about your people and looking after those people. And your environmental realm is about protecting our natural resources, our earth, for the future of our generations to come. So don't let those things become smoke screens to doing what you need to do as responsible producers and companies and as responsible members of society. Consumers have been sleptwalked into this world of consumerism where they can have what they want when they want it and not worry about the consequences of that. Well, we're now waking up to the consequences of that around the world. You know, we're seeing things happen. We have the power to change it. And we can do it at a pace that suits us, but we have to do it.
But I also think that if you start measuring everything, your water consumption, your energy consumption, and so on, you will actually be able to save a lot of money in your compliance. We had in 2003, we started a LIGHT program, less impact to the environment, it's called. And it became a profit center because we saved so much money. The cleaning of the wastewater was less. The temperature, the oil was less we bought. And so on and so on. So we ended up being break-even, I would say. So you can do it.
One more?
I just wanted to say, no, we need profit. It's a currency. And as long as sustainability is connected to profit, then it works. But I think the physical stream of goods is completely separated from the money and from the value stream. So we have to connect the value stream, the currencies, to sustainability. And this, in the Stone Age we exchanged goods without having money. So money is our software. We need money. We need profit as a guiding element or the guiding. I'm missing the word. It's a tool. Let's say it's a tool, but for what purpose? And this element of profit keeps us moving, of course, but link it to the right thing.
Right. And I think Apex is an industry leader when it comes to compliance, because just mentioning once again, achieving BSCI for a market where there is no requirement, where the brand felt that it was needed and not thinking about whether the consumers will be paying these prices, and is one of the best examples that we can have, and I'm sure other players in the market will continue to follow. And of course, profit is important, but that's not everything. I think to wrap up our discussion, I think we can all agree that leather is a sustainable material. Sure, I will in the end. Yeah. Oh, sure. So it is a sustainable material, and we just need to concentrate on our good practices in terms of ESG, and also concentrate on meeting the legislative changes, the regulatory changes that are coming every day, particularly from EU. We've started to see these changes coming. We just need to focus on, as Deborah says, AIM, accessible, inclusive, and modular approach. ETP discussion is an ongoing discussion. It'll come up every time we talk about leather, but there are 32 other elements which are completely in our hands, and it's high time that we start focusing on those 32 elements. This itself will change the narrative of the country, and it'll give us a voice to the world to not take a non-inclusive approach when it comes to Bangladesh, because once again, to remind everyone in this room, it is possible in Bangladesh. Thank you. And just as Deborah was mentioning, we have our next generation who I'm not sure whether they're going to stick to this leather industry, but our next generation. Aiden, do you want to come up? No? You don't want to come up? Clearly he doesn't want to be in this industry. But thank you everyone for joining us here today, and please feel free to go around and have a look at some of our exhibitors. On the ground floor we have beautiful product manufacturers, we have our supply chain people from tanneries, from hardware to zipper. We've included our whole supply chain this year in BLISS 2023, because without the support of the supply chain, we really cannot grow our leather goods and footwear business to the $5 billion or the even more challenging $10 billion target that our Honorable Prime Minister has given us yesterday during the inauguration. Thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of the show.